But when you were running Roughshod as a franchise, man, you were cutting some scathing promos involving yourself and Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Shoot promos, working promos, combination of both. And was there animosity between you guys? Because you're about to make a return to WCW. I believe he's got the book.
Right. No, he didn't have the book at that time. Bischoff was, when I went back, Bischoff had it. Bischoff and Russo eventually.
So the promo shoot work.
Shoot. They started off as total shoot because I'd sat back and I watched. First of all, I got into professional wrestling in large part to continue on with it because of Ric Flair. I was a huge Nature Boy fan. And I think you can see a lot of similarities in the characters. He was, we all know he was the measuring stick in our business. And as a kid in the business, I'd gone to him on several occasions, but it was around the time, probably around 88, 89, when I was there, and I went to him and I prefaced it. I said, look, I know you're busy. If you don't have time, I totally understand. Now, I had at this point told him straight up what I thought of him, how much I idolized his career and that sort of thing. And I said, look, I know you're busy, and if you don't have time, I get it, but if you ever get a chance to watch one of my matches or whatever, could you give me some feedback? Because, Steve, there's a time in your career when you know how to execute the moves. You don't know when to or when not to execute them. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, it would be an honor, sir. And over the next several weeks, maybe months, in my head I'm thinking weeks, but it was probably some period of time, every night he'd give me generic feedback. Good heat, good fire, good selling, good this, good that, but never, hey, that drop toe hold spot didn't work, it was in the wrong place. Never anything specific. And if you remember back in those matches, back when we worked, I would always do that cross body block, that pop cross body block. And I've been thinking to myself, and I'm talking myself out of it. He's bullshitting you. You're not thinking right. He's like, why would he bullshit you? And so one night I went out and I intentionally didn't do that move that night, the cross body block that night. And I came back and he was giving me the feedback. I said, what about the cross body block, Rick? And he stopped and thought about it, this long, pregnant pause, and I was telling myself, please say you didn't see it. Please say you didn't see it. And he stopped and he looked at me and went, perfect, better than Steamboat. And when he said that, he went from being, 6 foot tall to being like a 2 foot tall guy to me. Like, shoop, just shriveled up to me. And, and then there were a lot of other instances, where I saw him use the politics, like when he put Pillman with him in that first Roman Pillman came in. That was to keep him close enough that he could keep him under him. And, and I saw Rick, manipulate the politics that I spoke about earlier. That kind of stuff where I saw guys like you going through there, guys like Zank, me, Pillman, and on and on and on and on and on. This long list of talented young lions that were coming into the sport that were being kept under thumb. And let's face it, there wasn't one of us that ever would or could take the Nature Boy Ric Flair spot.
No.
But it was a time for him to pass the torch.
But don't get me wrong, we all thought we could, but in reality we could not.
Never. And so when I went to ECW and Paul said, say whatever you want, the reason I started shooting on him there in the first place sort of blew up in my face because Flair, other than Charlotte, Philadelphia and Chicago, Flair was a god. He could walk on water.
Right.
So I thought if I go out and start shooting, because I was getting that sort of mixed in between, even though I was supposed to be a heel, I was getting that sort of golf clap, boo, not a real decisive either way. So I'll go out and I'll shit on Flair and get real heat.
Right.
And instead, people started holding up Flair's dead signs and stuff. It was not the reaction that I was going for. And after about a year of it, Paul kept trying to keep burying Flair, and I said, Paul, it's ridiculous. They know he's not coming, although they came close at one point. I said, he's not coming, so for me to keep talking about it just looks sort of foolish. And he wanted me to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And I was refusing. One night I walked back to the dressing room, and Bob Ryder had said, did you hear Flair fired back on you? And he'd been telling me this all day, and I didn't want to read it. How the character, I don't give a shit what he had to say. I came back from the dressing room, still in character. As I walked through the curtain, he hands me this piece of paper, and I take it from his hand, not even realizing what he handed me. And I go over and I sit down at my locker, and I look at the paper, and it's Flair's comments back to me, And so I had a pretty good laugh over that, and I went back to Bob. I said, okay, you ready to write my response?
So
and it became the war of words. But look, truth be known, I look up to Rick and what he's accomplished in this business. Personally, as a human being, I'm sure I don't live up to somebody else's standard as a man or human being. And Rick fell far short in my head what I had, the pedestal that I had him on. Contract offer on my table that I never thought I would see, especially from WCW. And it really saved my financial life at that point for me and my family. So in that respect, I'll always be eternally thankful to Eric Bischoff and what he offered. But the reason he offered me that money was he wanted me versus Flair. He wanted me, his exact words were, I want to be the one that brings that to television. So when I went in the first day, it wasn't the first day. I knew I was going to be busy for the next 3 years. So I took my wife on an extended cruise, and on the way back, we stopped in Florida for a couple of days. They were doing Nitro that coming Monday in Jacksonville. So on my own dime, I stayed in Florida and went down to the building that night. I left Carla back at the hotel, and I went down just to say hello to everybody and let them see that I'm eager to be coming to work and, just feel the landscape out. And Flair walked in right behind me, and it was almost written perfectly, And when he walked in, remember that little walkway you had to walk through to get into the back of the Jacksonville building? I was standing there talking to Mikey Whipwreck was there, and Peaches and Sandman, and a bunch of people were standing around. Everybody goes dead quiet, and I could feel Flair. And one thing I've always said about Flair, Hogan, and Dusty, they have that charisma factor that you can feel them walk into a room. You have your back to the door, but you know they're there.
Right.
And as I turned around, I said, Rick, how you doing? And sure enough, he's standing right behind me. I said, how are you, sir? And, we shook hands, and I knew everybody was watching to see how this went. And so as he went to pull away, I went and let go of his hand. I said, Rick, I think you and I should talk. We got some things got to get clear. And he looked around and could realize, consummate politician that he is, looked around and realized it was not placed to say nothing opposite. And he said, give me 20 minutes, I'd sit down and talk to you. So I went down to the food service for about 45 minutes or so. I went back up, knocked on the door, and we went in, and first thing he did was jump over, shook his hand, and said, I want to start by saying I'm sorry. And I said, Rick, look, I can't accept your apology. I know you're not sincere, but I'm not going to apologize either. And said, that's exactly why this can work. At that time, WWF was starting to slaughter them in the ratings, and I knew that there was enough interest in me and Flair in the shoot of it that we could help turn it around, and had it been utilized properly. And I asked him, I looked at him and asked him, look in the eye, Rick, I'm going to ask you man to man, are you man enough to uphold your end of this angle? And he thought about it for a second. He said, yes, sir, I am. And I said, great, then we're going to make this company a lot of money. And found out right after that from Russo and others in the office that he started politicking from that first day to try to keep the angle from being elevated to where I thought it should have been and could have been. And if you look at the match, the one match that we had there, you had David involved and Sting, and I think Russo came down in a mask, and there was all kind of skullduggery in the match. But it certainly wasn't a match that Ric Flair and Shane Douglas could have had.
Why do you think it was?
I've been pretty vocal about Rick, and had said some pretty strong comments over the years. I'm sure he wasn't happy to be working with me. And quite frankly, I wasn't happy to be working with him either. But that's exactly the reason why I could have worked in that era that was coming out of ECW. ECW was now gone at that point, or certainly at the tail end. And WWE had started taking that ratings war back over, that something like that pushed properly the reality of it, that these two guys genuinely don't like each other. To me, where shoot fighting has gone is where wrestling should have always gone.
Right.
It should have gone more towards that reality edge. To me, we've allowed Dana White to take the reality part of our business and left us holding the cartoon back of it. And I think that Ric Flair and Shane Douglas could have been, part of the initial stage of that.